Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. We get to talk to another wonderful musician. Mary Edwards is here with us today, a musician that is not only a composer, a singer, a songwriter, an arranger, a multi-instrumentalist. She has been influenced by Burt Bacharach, The Carpenters, Herb Alpert, Ennio Morricone. Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
Quincy Jones, and so many others. She is incorporating sound and architecture. She plays keyboards, horns, the strings, percussion. She's also a backup singer to some groups you may know about. Ladies and gentlemen, I have talked to very few people who could translate the space of creativity integrated with being in the business of making music. Welcome, Mary Edwards, to It's Rainmaking Time.
Thank you so much, Kim.
I really appreciate you being here. A couple of weeks ago, we had on Ben Dowling, pianist, composer, producer, and programmer, music director. And I think that it's also very important to talk to women who are in this business, who are competent and successful and are experiencing good fortune in the business, to share the path with other men and women who are either trying to get in the business or partially in the business, but are really looking for some type of wisdom about how to be here. You do a lot of things, way more than a lot of musicians who are just playing one particular instrument. Talk to us a little bit about how you got into being a musician. How did you become a composer?
Well, I've always been fascinated with putting music together. I've always had a deep love for music, but I would say as far back as I could remember, I experienced this marriage of music and film at an early age. I was entranced by the romance of these complementary mediums, the lush epic scores, how they swept me into these abstract fantasias and grand-scale lullabies. When I was a kid, our family would go to the movies, and they'd take me at a very young age. I mean, I was really a baby when we went to go see films like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Once Upon a Time in the West, You Only Live Twice, James Bond movies. And I was initiated into this landscape that was sort of inhabited by these composers like Burt Bacharach and Ennio Morricone and John Barry. These people changed the public's conception of how film music could not only emphasize a storyline but provide a soundtrack to our lives and imaginations outside the cinema. And moments like that really enraptured me. And I knew from that moment on, I knew from my childhood on, I wanted to create that kind of experience for myself and for other people. I loved how it emotionally shifted me.
Doesn't film score really bring together and combine the emotional and textual motif of a film?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, too, scores are sometimes better than the film in terms of cinematography or storyline, and that they are strong in their own right. And if a film is good, then there's naturally an enrichment simpatico between the score and the film.
Could that be why I'm still crying over the film Born Free that I saw as a child?
and probably for the same reason I'm crying over Rocky II, even though it came out so many years ago. Every time I watch that scene where Rocky is running through the streets of Philadelphia and the kids are following him and chasing him and cheering him on, as he's running to the top of the stairs, Bill Conti's music is all queued up and going into that monumental epic finish, just as Rocky is. It's matching his movements. But listening to the score alone can make me cry.
That was a great movie. That really was. You play 4 or 5 instruments. How in the heck did you learn all of that and then incorporate that in your compositions now?
Well, again, it goes back to the opportunity, the exposure, if you will, to a lot of instruments. I grew up in a household, there were 5 kids, and we had different musical leanings, but we all sort of had the same similar threads. So, for instance, my sister would play violin, but she also had this proclivity towards the guitar, as did my middle brother, who loved the guitar, but his main instrument was trumpet and double bass. I had another brother who plays drums and another brother who played clarinet.
Wow, you have a whole family that's into music.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, although we were never groomed to play together as a band, we influenced each other not just in our attractions to different instruments, but to different music. So I also had the fortune of growing up in a household where my parents listened to a lot of music, they encouraged a lot of music, and everybody had a different leaning, and yet there was a lot of crossover. So albums were shared, ideas were shared about music, about art, and in close listening to music, I was always fascinated with how things were orchestrated. So once again, that's what drew me to what different instruments could do in terms of adding color and adding mood and adding shape. So there's a crossover for me with the visual and the oral.
When did you know that you could be an arranger as well? Because I think that's a special gift. That's also a special gift. Arranging is really...
That is indeed a gift. It was something that I was attracted to in other people, people who were doing it professionally long before I was. Again, having just an ear and being drawn to what an arranger could do. You know, as you know, arrangements can shift a mood or
totally
convey a different conviction altogether.
It can change the whole song.
My earliest recognition of that was going through my parents' record collection and finding an Otis Redding album that had a version of Respect on it. Now, I was so familiar with Aretha Franklin's version, I got excited, and I remember putting it on the turntable and listening to it. And I remember frowning a bit initially because I thought, this isn't Aretha Franklin's version. This has a completely different feel to it. It has a completely different meaning. Hers has this conviction of, I'm a strong woman, I'm not going to take any business from anybody. Otis Redding is basically telling his woman what to do. So the he said, she said, the women's lib versus the male chauvinist version of the very same song, the same lyrics, different horn arrangements, a different drive, a different syncopation altogether.
Were your parents scared for you to enter the music business formally, the way a lot of parents are very concerned for their kids?
No, I think the irony of it was that I was scared that my parents were not scared. They were telling
See, it doesn't matter as a kid which way the parents do it, because either way we're going to have our issues, right?
You know, what's really funny is that my parents had said to me from an early age on, do you want to go to art school? Do you want to go to music school? You should, and you could. And make sure you stay in tune with your liberal arts. I don't see any reason why you can't pursue this. So they actually
That's great.
had more confidence in me before I could even develop confidence. So I loved that about them. I always found that dear, that my parents were thinking any drive has the ability to be a profession.
You really have a calling. You have more than a profession. You have calling. You couldn't get away from it if you tried.
Absolutely. I know that it's a calling because it's not always about the money. It's not always about making a living aspect of it, although, of course, it has to be. But I know it's a calling when I'm connecting to others. Creating and art making is not navel-gazing. It's not internal. It's something that if I'm feeling this, I know someone else must be feeling it. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're growing up and you find something about you that's a little different or something that not everybody else is doing, but you say to yourself, I can't possibly be the only one who's going through this, but yet I can't articulate it either. And I remember getting that very, very strong feeling early on about how emotionally effective music and sound could be.
Very. When we were talking about creativity, you said something that was very interesting. You said, spaces aren't meant to always be filled. Talk about that in terms of creating. What does that mean? I thought that was very interesting.
Right. I believe in spaces as something to behold themselves. The crossover also for me with music goes into architecture. I tend to be influenced by sound and space. And a lot of my new work is going in that direction. And one of the, or actually two, of